things are changing so radically, but it was banned at that time to even have any treatises or pamphlets or books that are critical of Najdi theology. And I remember to this day that the first time I acquired such books, the university library did not have these books. You had to get special permission, and I was not able to get it as an undergraduate. I don't know if that is the case now, but when I was in Medina, they have a special section called, the bid'ah books, for example, and it is not allowed to go there except by applying, or if you are a master's student in Aqidah, you have the right to go there. And so you have to get special permission. And only when I got into the master's program was I able to go to that section. And they had Plato and Aristotle and other books over there. And other, these things are forbidden, to be read outside. I don't know what the situation is right now. This I'm talking about the mid 90s. Late 90s. But in any case, I remember that the first time I managed to get those books was when I traveled to Egypt for the first time as an adult in my life. For the first time I traveled to Egypt, and you still see the series. Ironically, I was teaching the theology of Ibn Abdul Wahhab for, what is it, Al-Huda TV? I mean, this is 2001, I want to say, 2001. And you see that's the first time that I'm doing a television show. My beard, mashallah, tabarakallah, is full. You have clips online from that. And I'm summarizing in my own way, Kitab al-Tawheed. And it was the first time that I went to Egypt, and I went to all the bookstores, and I purchased and acquired for the very first time treatises and books that were critical. And this is actually one of the books that I bought in that bazaar in Egypt, which is a book that has been translated into English as well. And it is the criticism of Sulaiman ibn Abdul Wahhab for his younger brother Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. It's actually a very scholarly book, a very erudite book. And I remember reading this book cover to cover. I was so excited to get this book back in 2001. I remember reading it thinking that I'd be able to refute this instantaneously. And I remember being very confused, like, wow, this is not something I'm able to refute. And I put it aside, say, maybe I don't understand. I'm still a graduate student. My mashayikh are so much more knowledgeable than me. And this is a reality. When you're part of a movement, there's a psychological and emotional connection that a lot of people, they don't even understand. There is a psychological connection to your movement, a group think that is, and it's natural. There's nothing wrong with that. You automatically want to associate with your group and think like your group. And when somebody comes and basically criticizes your entire group or shows something wrong with it, there's a natural defense mechanism that kicks in. I read this book cover to cover, and I was shocked is a hard word. I was like confused is a better word, because that's not the image that I had of the critics of Ibn Abdul Wahhab. The image that I had was basically a bunch of whirling dervishes and wanting to go and worship other than Allah, trying to justify that worship. And reading this book, it seemed to be a very erudite, a very scholarly, and actually I was like, I can't even answer some of these things, and I just left it for many years until the idea came. Like I said, finally a click. Like, I need to understand what's going on. And I read the book again, but this time with an open mind. When I first read it, I read it as a critic. When I first read it, I read it wanting to refute and defend the ideology I was upon, and that's why I'm not going to get to it. But the second time I read it, I'm like, okay, I agree with everything here. It's actually exactly what I myself concluded without directly reading the book. If you get my drift, I had already reached those conclusions, and then I read the book and like, oh, okay, that's exactly what I've been saying. And the point that needs to be mentioned here is that the theology of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, it does, the beliefs that he's teaching, it necessitates a certain level of fanaticism that is dangerous for the ummah, right? Now, see, here's the point. It's no big deal if you say that, going to the qabr and asking the qabr is shirk. In and of itself, it's no big deal. Honestly, it's a position that, if that were it, no problem. Okay, and it's good that people are warned from doing that, right? Throughout this whole lecture, I've been saying you should not go to the grave. It's no problem to say that it is shirk, in the sense that you're preventing people from doing it. It's good you're closing the door. The problem comes that, what do you do then with those that don't agree with you? Okay, it's one thing if you feel it and you don't do it. Alhamdulillah. I mean, let me give you an example. If you said that drinking alcohol makes you a kafir, for example, okay, if that's the way you felt, okay, good for you. Don't drink alcohol. We don't want you to drink alcohol. But the problem comes, what are you going to do when you see somebody else drinking alcohol and it's haram and you think it's kufr or shirk, right? That's the problem. And this problem is compounded when you are dealing with practices that are prevalent in almost every single Muslim land, and practices that are sometimes sanctioned, sometimes considered mubah, sometimes considered makruh, sometimes considered haram, but nobody considers them to be shirk. And you come along and you say that these practices that nobody ever considered to be shirk or kufr akbar, you consider them to be shirk or kufr akbar. What are the implications of that, right? Those implications were manifested in the early Najdi da'wah. And the fanaticism of this movement is not an aberration that goes against their beliefs and ideals and theologies. It is a logical consequence of their own beliefs. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab made claims that no human being before him ever made, such as the Muslims of his time, those that did some of these practices, were worse than Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl. A'udhu billah. You're talking about senior scholars of the Shafi'i and Hanbali and Hanafi and Maliki schools, the Imams of Haram. He's talking about them by name, the ones that are leading the Salah in the Haram, and he's saying these people are worse than Abu Jahl, because you have to do that when you come and you say that these practices are all shirk and kufr akbar. And this is exactly what Sulaiman, the older brother, says. And I have this actually, I don't know if you can see that. I actually have this, marked when I read this. Like, it's very intriguing. Like, he literally says, he mentions certain things, and he goes, some ulama made these things makruh, some made them haram, some made them permissible, but none of them made them kufr akbar. None of them made the people who did these murtad until you came along. And فَأَخَذْتُمْ هَذِهِ بِمَفَاهِيمِكُم. You derived these interpretations, وَفَارَقْتُمُ الْإِجْمَاعِ, and you broke ijma', وَكَفَرْتُمْ أُمَّةَ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ كلهم. You made kufr of the entire ummah because you said that whoever does these deeds is a kafir. وَمَنْ لَمْ يُكَفِّرْهُ فَهُوَ كافر. And whoever doesn't make kufr of the one that is doing them is also a kafir. And then listen to this. This is the older brother of Sulaiman ibn Abdul Wahhab, the older brother of Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, right? He's also a scholar. He's a trained Hanbali. He studied, with the ulama of his time. Now listen to this, okay? These things, ملأت بلاد المسلمين. هذه الأمور. These matters have filled the Muslim lands. Sorry, I lost my place here. ملأت بلاد المسلمين وعند أهل العلم منهم أنها ملأت بلاد المسلمين من أكثر من 700 عام. And the people of knowledge say that these things have been around for more than these practices, such as visiting the graves, traveling to visit the graves, even asking the people of the grave or tabarruk with the grave. These things he doesn't agree with. That's the point. Sulaiman does not agree with these things. He says they're wrong. He says they're haram or bid'ah or don't do them. But he's saying you guys made takfir. You guys took it to a level of kufr. And then he goes, these practices were prevalent amongst the people for more than 700 years. And none of the people before made kufr until you came along. Rather, all of the scholars of the previous times considered those Muslims who did these things to be Muslims. أجروا عليهم أحكام المسلمين. They consider them to be Muslim. As for you, you have considered them to be kuffar and murtad. And you have made even the Haramain Sharifain murtad. You have considered Mecca and Medina and the people who live in Mecca and Medina to be murtad. Even though we know from our Sharia that the Prophet said Islam is going to be preserved in these places. And even the Dajjal will not be able to enter Mecca and Medina. And you have made the people of Mecca and Medina mushrik and kafir. And you see, this is the necessary corollary. What's going to happen when you say that whoever doesn't consider this to be shirk is himself a mushrik, what's going to happen is the entire world becomes mushrik, the entire Muslim ummah becomes mushrik other than you. And of course, you will be forced to say that, and Ibn Sulaiman challenges his brother. He says, bring me who said this before you. Bring me. And he, by the way, as for Ibn Taymiyyah ibn Qayyim, this is a much longer discussion. Maybe one day I'll have it. But the scholars of the Hanabila who opposed Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, including his brother, and including Ibn Afariq, and including the senior Hanbali scholar of Mecca at the time, they all said that Ibn Abdul Wahhab has completely misunderstood. In fact, you know what? If I can find it quickly here. The key point here, yes, here, okay, there's a chapter here, As-Su'alu li ghayrillah, right? Asking other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he is saying if somebody asks, with the intention that the person doing it can have the power to save them and whatnot, this is kufr, but nobody says anything other than this. And then he goes, as for the bringing of Ibn Taymiyyah's statement, that whoever calls out to the entities and puts tawakkul, makes ويتوكل عليهم, and puts his trust in them, then this is kufr bil ijma'. He goes, look at the ibarah, look at the wordings of Ibn Taymiyyah and others, that they are saying whoever calls out and puts their tawakkul. There's an and here, and the tawakkul is put in the one that has the power to benefit and harm you. The mere asking, he says, is not necessarily kufr akbar. And he says that you have taken your mafahim from these ibarat and misunderstood Ibn Qayyim and Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, so now again, you can say Sulaiman misunderstood Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Abdul Wahhab was correct. Then you're also saying a large group of Hanbali scholars. My simple point is that don't make a simplistic assumption that Ibn Abdul Wahhab is the same as Ibn Taymiyyah. I have said many times, and maybe one day I'll give a longer lecture, but there's more research that needs to be done. Ibn Taymiyyah was very different than Ibn Abdul Wahhab. There is no correlation between them in terms of the takfir of the masses. And the point being, when you come and you say that the entire ummah is kafir because of my understanding, you're going to have to admit that my understanding is unique, that nobody before me had this understanding. And this is exactly what Ibn Abdul Wahhab says. This is the Saudi publishing of Ad-Durr as-Saniyah. This is the one printed in Riyadh. This is the famous one by Muhammad al-Qasim al-Najdi and others. This is the edition that is the official